The sky turned black on a Tuesday afternoon. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, staring through the viewport at something his mind could not accept. Hundreds of ships hung in the air above Earth. They were massive, each one larger than any building humans had ever built. Their hulls were dark purple, almost black, and they moved without sound through the clouds. "Sir, we are receiving transmissions from every major city," said Lieutenant Amy Lawson. Her voice was shaking. "They are all reporting the same thing. The aliens are everywhere." Jake did not answer. He could not find the words. Humanity had dreamed of meeting life from other worlds for centuries. They had sent signals into space. They had searched for signs of intelligence among the stars. Now that intelligence had found them, and it had come with weapons. The first shots came without warning. Bright beams of energy struck the surface of the Earth. Military bases disappeared in flashes of light. Aircraft carriers sank beneath boiling oceans. Fighter jets fell from the sky like burning leaves. In less than 3 hours, every weapon humanity possessed was destroyed. Jake watched the destruction on his screens. The horizon's edge was a small ship, built for exploration, not war. It had no weapons that could scratch the paint on those alien vessels. He and his crew could only watch as their world burned. "We are being hailed," Amy said quietly. "Put it through." The main screen flickered and a face appeared. It was not human. The creature had pale blue skin stretched tight over a skull that was longer than any human head. Its eyes were large and completely black, like pools of oil. When it spoke, the words came through in perfect English, though its mouth moved in different patterns. "I am Supreme Arbiter Kirith of the Valdari Dominion. Your species has been judged. Your military strength is broken. Your governments will now receive our terms. You will surrender completely, or every living thing on your planet will be removed from existence. You have 1 hour to decide." The screen went dark. Jake looked around at his crew. Some were crying. Others stared at nothing, their faces empty with shock. Engineer Sam Cortez stayed at his station with his head in his hands. "What do we do, Commander?" Amy asked. Jake closed his eyes. He thought about his daughter back on Earth. He thought about his wife, his parents, everyone he had ever known. The aliens had destroyed their weapons in hours. What chance did they have? "We survive," he said. "That is what we do. We survive, and we remember." 1 hour later, the governments of Earth sent their answer. They surrendered. The Valdari did not celebrate. They did not laugh or mock. They simply accepted the surrender like it was expected. Like humanity had never been a threat at all. 3 days later, the Valdari High Council gathered aboard their command ship to decide the fate of Earth. Supreme Arbiter Kirith sat on a throne made of black metal, surrounded by dozens of other Valdari leaders. They had done this many times before. They had conquered 1,000 worlds across the galaxy. Some they had enslaved. Others they had stripped of resources and left as dead rocks floating in space. A few they had simply destroyed because the inhabitants were too troublesome to keep alive. "The humans are weak," one counselor said. "They have nothing we need. Their planet is small, their resources common. I say we leave them as slaves to mine their own world for us. Their population is too large to control easily," another argued. "Better to reduce their numbers first. Leave only enough to serve." Kirith listened to the debate without expression. He had already made his decision. These humans were insects. They had barely left their own solar system. Their weapons were primitive. Their ships were slow. They were not worth the effort of conquest. He was about to give the order to enslave them when a young voice spoke from the back of the chamber. "I request permission to address the council." Kirith turned his head slowly. The speaker was a young female Valdari named Thera. She was the daughter of High Counselor Veth, one of the oldest families in the Dominion. She was also very young, barely past her coming-of-age ceremony. "You may speak," Kirith said, curious despite himself. Dyra walked forward until she stood before the throne. She was smaller than most Valdari, with lighter blue skin and eyes that held something different from the cold arrogance common to her people. "I have studied these humans during our approach," she said. "I have watched their broadcasts, read their literature, observed their behavior. They are primitive, yes. Weak, yes. But they possess something I have rarely seen in our conquests." "And what is that?" Kirith asked. "Potential." Thera paused, choosing her words carefully. "They have existed as a species for only a short time. Yet in that time, they have gone from caves to cities to reaching for the stars. They learn quickly. They adapt. They dream of things beyond themselves. All the more reason to destroy them now," a counselor interrupted. "Before they become a threat." "They will never be a threat," Thyra replied calmly. "We have seen to that. But I propose something different. I propose we show them mercy." The chamber erupted in murmurs and hisses of disapproval. Mercy was not a Valdari concept. It was seen as weakness, as foolishness. Kirith raised his hand, and silence fell. "Explain your reasoning, child." "If we enslave them or destroy them, we gain nothing of value. But if we spare them, if we leave their world intact and walk away, we prove something to the galaxy. We prove that we are so far above them that they are not worth our attention. We prove that the Valdari Dominion fears nothing and no one. What greater show of strength than to look at a species and decide they are too insignificant to bother with?" The counselors shifted uncomfortably. Her words made a strange kind of sense. Kirith stared at the young female for a long moment. Then, slowly, his thin lips curved into something like a smile. "Very well. We shall vote." The vote was close, but Dara's argument won. The Valdari would leave Earth in peace. They would mark it as a protected territory, forbidden for conquest. Because the humans were simply beneath notice. As the Valdari fleet prepared to depart, Admiral Grace Patterson stood in the ruins of what had been the United Nations building. She was the highest-ranking military officer still alive on Earth. Around her gathered the few other leaders who had survived: Jake Morrison, Amy Lawson, Sam Cortez, and a handful of others. "They are leaving," Grace said, watching the alien ships rise into the sky. "They showed us mercy. They showed us contempt," Jake replied bitterly. "They think we are nothing." Grace turned to face him. Her eyes were hard, but behind that hardness burned something fierce. "Then we will show them what nothing can become. We will rebuild. We will grow stronger. And one day, when they have forgotten we exist, we will remind them." She looked at each person gathered there. "Swear it with me. Swear that our children, and their children after them, will carry this promise until it is fulfilled." One by one, they swore. The Valdari ships disappeared into the stars, confident that they would never hear from humanity again. They were wrong. The years passed slowly at first, then faster. In the months after the Valdari departure, humanity grieved. They buried their dead. They rebuilt their cities. They tried to make sense of a universe that had suddenly become much larger and much more dangerous. But beneath the grief and the fear, something else was growing. It was anger. It was determination. It was the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. The Global Unity Council formed within the first year. For the first time in history, every nation on Earth joined together under a single purpose. There would be no more wars between countries. There would be no more arguments about borders or resources. All of humanity's effort would go toward one goal: becoming strong enough that no one would ever threaten them again. Admiral Grace Patterson became the first commander of United Earth Forces. She was old by then, her hair white and her body tired, but her spirit burned as bright as ever. She created the Strategic Development Division, a secret organization dedicated to understanding and recreating Valdari technology. "We have fragments," she told her team during their first meeting. "Pieces of their ships that fell during the attack. Wreckage from the weapons they used against us. It is not much, but it is a starting point." Dr. Nathan Brooks led the science team. He was a young man then, brilliant and eager, with a mind that could see patterns where others saw only chaos. He spent 18-hour days in the laboratory, studying every scrap of alien material they could find. "Their technology is centuries ahead of ours," he admitted to Grace one evening. "Maybe thousands of years. The power systems alone operate on principles we do not even have names for. Can you understand it?" Grace asked. Nathan smiled tiredly. "Not yet, but I will." The work continued in secret. On the surface, humanity appeared to be recovering normally. Cities were rebuilt. Economies stabilized. People went back to their lives. But beneath the surface, in hidden facilities around the world, the real work was happening. Deep under the mountains of Colorado, engineers built the first prototype human starship based on Valdari principles. It exploded on its first test flight, killing 12 people. The second prototype also failed, and the third. But each failure taught them something new, and they kept building. On the dark side of the moon, construction began on shipyards that would one day produce fleets of warships. The work was slow and dangerous. Accidents happened. Lives were lost. But no one complained. Everyone understood what was at stake. Grace Patterson died 23 years after the invasion. She never saw the first successful test of a human faster-than-light engine. But her last words, spoken to her successor, Admiral Ryan Cortez, became a rallying cry for the generations that followed. "We are not doing this for revenge," she whispered. "We are doing this so that no one, human or otherwise, will ever have to feel as helpless as we did. Remember that." Ryan Cortez was the grandson of Sam Cortez, the engineer who had stood with Grace on that terrible day. The promise had passed from generation to generation, growing stronger with each passing year. Dr. Nathan Brooks died at the age of 74, still working in his laboratory. His daughter, Claire, took over his research. She had grown up surrounded by alien fragments and equations that described impossible things. To her, the technology was not strange. It was simply a puzzle waiting to be solved. In 2198, 51 years after the invasion, Claire Brooks called an emergency meeting of the Unity Council. "We have done it," she announced. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. "We have cracked the secret of faster-than-light travel." The room erupted in cheers and tears. For half a century, this had been their dream. Now it was real. The first human ship to travel faster than light was named Hope. It was small, barely large enough for a crew of 10, but it crossed the distance from Earth to Alpha Centauri in less than a day. A journey that would have taken thousands of years with old technology now took hours. Admiral Ryan Cortez stood on the observation deck, watching the stars streak past in lines of light. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "Yes," Claire replied. "Now we can go anywhere. Now we can hide." That was the next phase of the plan. Humanity could not build their strength under the eyes of the galaxy. The Valdari had marked Earth as a protected territory, which meant other species left them alone. But it also meant they were being watched, at least occasionally. If the Valdari learned what humanity was really doing, they would return and finish what they started. So humanity spread in secret. Scout ships went out in every direction, searching for worlds far from the traveled routes of the galaxy. They found 12 suitable planets in the first decade. Colonists followed, building hidden settlements on worlds that did not appear on any galactic maps. The colonies grew quickly. Each one specialized in something different. One focused on ship construction, another on weapons development, a third on training soldiers. Together, they formed a network of hidden strength that no one in the galaxy suspected existed. General Kate Sullivan established the Stellar Marine Corps. She was a hard woman, shaped by tragedy. She had lost her entire family in the invasion, and she channeled that grief into purpose. Her training programs were brutal, designed to break down recruits and rebuild them into warriors. The Vaulderie think strength means big ships and powerful weapons, she told her Marines. They are wrong. Strength means will. It means refusing to die, even when everything tells you that you should. That is what we will teach you. Her methods worked. The Marines who graduated from her program were unlike any soldiers humanity had ever produced. They could fight in any environment, from the vacuum of space to the crushing pressure of ocean depths. They feared nothing because they had been trained to face everything. By 2247, exactly 100 years after the invasion, humanity had transformed. Their fleet numbered 300 warships, each one faster and more deadly than anything the Vaulderie had seen before. Their army included 2 million trained soldiers, ready to fight across any battlefield. Their colonies produced resources and technology at a rate that would have amazed their ancestors. Admiral Ben Lawson was the great-grandson of Amy Lawson, who had been a young lieutenant on the Horizon's Edge during the invasion. He now commanded the 1st Expeditionary Fleet, humanity's most powerful military force. He stood before a gathering of admirals and generals in the hidden command center on Mars. 100 years ago, the Vaulderie looked at humanity and saw nothing worth their attention, he said. Today, we are ready to show the galaxy who we really are. But we will not strike first. We will not become conquerors like them. We will wait for the right moment, the right cause, and then we will reveal ourselves. And when we do, the universe will never forget. The officers nodded in agreement. They had all grown up with the stories. They had all made the same promise their parents and grandparents had made, but they did not have to wait long. 3 years later, a distress signal reached Earth from the far edge of the galaxy. It came from a small colony on a world called Kestros 4. The colony was under attack by a species called the Gentari Horde, a swarm of creatures that consumed everything in their path. The colony was Vaulderie. Or rather, it had been founded by Vaulderie, who had fallen from grace with the Dominion. Its people were the descendants of a family that had once been great, the family of Thyra. When intelligence officer Lieutenant Megan Torres decoded the colony's historical records and discovered this connection. She brought the information directly to Admiral Lawson. He read the report in silence. Then he looked up at her with eyes that burned with purpose. "Prepare the fleet," he said. "We have a debt to repay." The waiting was over. Humanity was about to announce itself to the galaxy. The Gentari came like a plague. They were not like other species in the galaxy. They did not build civilizations or create art or dream of things beyond survival. They existed only to consume. Their ships were not constructed from metal and circuits. They were grown, living things that flew through space like enormous insects. And inside those ships were millions of Gentari warriors, each one a nightmare of claws and teeth and hunger. Kestros 4 was a small world on the edge of known space. Its single colony held only 50,000 people, descendants of Vaulderie who had been exiled generations ago. They had built a quiet life there, farming the purple fields and raising their children far from the politics of the Dominion. Vida was the leader of the colony. She was young for such responsibility, only 40 years old, which was considered barely adult by Vaulderie standards. But she had been chosen because of her name. She was the great-granddaughter of Thyra. The woman who had once spoken before the High Council and pleaded for the survival of an alien species called humans. That act of mercy had destroyed her family's standing. The Voldari valued strength and dominance, not compassion. When Thyra died, her descendants were stripped of their titles and sent to the frontier, where they would be forgotten. Vida had grown up hearing stories about her ancestor. Some told them with shame, calling Thyra weak and foolish. But Vida's grandmother had told them differently. She said Thyra had seen something no one else could see. She had looked at the humans and recognized a spark of greatness that deserved a chance to grow. Was she right? Young Vida had asked. Her grandmother had smiled sadly. We may never know. The humans are still on their little world, far away. But I believe she was right. I believe that one day they will prove it. Now, as Vida watched the Gentari swarm approaching her world, she thought about those words. The colony had sent distress signals in every direction. They had begged the Valdari Dominion for help. The response had been silence. The High Council had voted. Castro's IV was too far away, too unimportant, too costly to defend. The descendants of Thera would be left to die. How long until they reach us? Vida asked her advisor, an old Valdari named Sareth. 6 hours, he replied. His voice was steady, but she could see the fear in his eyes. Our defense systems might slow them down, but we cannot stop them. There are too many. Vida nodded slowly. She had already accepted her fate. All she could do now was make sure her people faced the end with dignity. Gather everyone in the central plaza, she said. I want to speak to them one last time. But she never gave that speech. 3 hours before the Gentari arrived, something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to tear open, and ships emerged from nowhere. 40 of them, sleek and silver, moving faster than any vessel Vida had ever seen. What is that? Sareth gasped. Those are not Valdari ships. I do not recognize the design. Neither did anyone else. The ships were unlike anything in the galactic database. They were smaller than Valdari warships, but moved with a grace and speed that seemed almost impossible. A transmission came through, and Vida stared at the face on her screen. It was strange, soft-skinned and oddly proportioned, with small eyes and hair growing from its head. This is Admiral Ben Lawson of the Terran Alliance, the creature said. We received your distress signal. We are here to help. Vida could not speak. She knew what this creature was. Every Valdari knew the story, even if most had forgotten the details. These were humans. The species her ancestor had saved a century ago. How is this possible? Sareth whispered. They should be primitive. They should be trapped on their homeworld. But the evidence was right in front of them. 40 human warships had just traveled across the galaxy faster than any Valdari vessel could manage. Admiral Lawson's face remained calm on the screen. We know who you are, Vida of Kestros 4. We know that your ancestors saved our people when we had no hope. Today, we repay that debt. Stay inside the colony shields. We will handle the rest. The transmission ended. The Battle of Kestros 4 began 1 hour later when the Gentari swarm emerged from deep space. There were thousands of them, biological ships ranging from small fighters to massive high vessels that dwarfed even the largest human cruisers. Admiral Lawson stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Constellation, watching the swarm approach. All ships. This is the Admiral, he said into the fleet-wide channel. Today we fight for something greater than ourselves. Today we show the galaxy what humanity stands for. Not conquest, not revenge, justice, honor, the debt we owe to those who showed us mercy when we deserved none. Let us make them proud. The human fleet moved forward. Captain Danny Webb commanded the fighter squadron known as the Silver Wolves. They were the first to engage the enemy. their small craft weaving through the swarm with impossible precision. "Watch your spacing," Danny called to his pilots. "Do not let them surround you. Hit and move, hit and move." The Gentari had never faced anything like human fighters before. Their tactics were based on overwhelming numbers, drowning enemies in waves of bodies until nothing remained. But the human pilots were too fast, too coordinated. They danced through the swarm, their weapons cutting down enemy ships by the dozens. Lieutenant Megan Torres coordinated the battle from the Constellation's command center. Her tactical displays showed the entire battlefield, and she directed the fleet's movements with calm efficiency. Cruiser Group Alpha, flank left. Destroyer Squadron Beta, cover their approach. "I am detecting a command node at coordinates 773. "I see it," Danny Webb replied. "Silver wolves on me. We are going for the heart." The command node was a massive bioship at the center of the swarm. It controlled the others, directing their movements through some kind of hive mind. If they could destroy it, the swarm would fall into chaos. Danny led his squadron through a wall of enemy fire. Ships exploded around him. He heard his pilots screaming as they died. But he did not stop. He could not stop. Everything depended on reaching that node. "Almost there?" he growled through gritted teeth. "Just a little farther." His fighter took a hit that shattered his shields and tore open his hull. Warning alarms screamed in his ears. He ignored them. "Launching payload," he announced, his finger pressing the button that released his entire weapons load into the command. Node's exposed core. The explosion was enormous. Danny's ship was caught in the blast, spinning wildly out of control. He lost consciousness as G-forces crushed him into his seat. When he woke up, he was in the Constellation's medical bay. Lieutenant Torres was standing over him with a rare smile on her face. "You did it," she said. "The command node is destroyed. The swarm is breaking apart." Danny tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "The battle? We won. The Gentari are retreating. We lost 8 ships and 200 personnel, but the colony is safe. All 50,000 civilians survived." Danny closed his eyes and let out a long breath. It was worth it. Every sacrifice was worth it. In orbit above Kestros 4, Admiral Lawson received a message from a Valdari observation vessel that had arrived too late to participate in the battle. "Human vessel. Identify yourself and explain your presence in this sector." Lawson smiled grimly and opened a response channel. "This is Admiral Ben Lawson of the Terran Alliance. 100 years ago, a Valdari woman named Thyra showed humanity mercy when she could have let us die. Today, we have repaid that debt by saving her descendants. The people of Kestros 4 are under our protection. Any who threaten them will answer to us." The Valdari observer was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, the transmission ended. On the surface of Kestros 4, Vitha stood in the ruins of her colony's outer wall, watching the human ships patrol overhead. Tears streamed down her blue cheeks. "You were right, grandmother," she whispered. She was right about them. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had announced itself not with conquest or destruction, but with honor, with gratitude, with the kind of strength that the Valdari had never understood. And this was only the beginning. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. Within days, every species with access to interstellar communication had heard the story. A race called humans, supposedly primitive and forgotten, had appeared from nowhere and destroyed a Gentari swarm. They had saved a colony that even the mighty Valdari Dominion had abandoned. And they had done it with technology that no one recognized. Questions exploded across diplomatic channels. Who were these humans? Where did they come from? How had they advanced so far without anyone noticing? The Valdari High Council demanded answers. Supreme Arbiter, Vorath sat on the same black throne his ancestor Kirith had occupied a century before. His face was calm, but inside he felt something he had not experienced in decades. It was fear. He did not like the feeling. "Explain this to me," he said to his intelligence chief, a thin Voldari named Kethros. "Our records say these humans are primitive. They should have technology roughly equivalent to our early space age. Instead, they appear with ships that move faster than ours and weapons that cut through Gentari biomore like it is paper." "How?" Kethros shifted uncomfortably. "We do not know, Supreme Arbiter. Our monitoring of their homeworld has been minimal. After the original conquest, we considered them too insignificant to watch closely. Too insignificant." Vorath repeated the words slowly, letting his contempt fill them. "And now this insignificant species has humiliated us before the entire galaxy." He stood from his throne and walked to the window that looked out over the capital city of Vulderus Prime. Millions of his people lived below, confident in the Dominion's power, unaware that their supremacy had just been challenged. "Find out everything," Vorath ordered. "I want to know how many ships they have, how many soldiers, how many worlds they control. I want to know their weaknesses. And I want to know why they chose to save a colony of exiles descended from a traitor." Kethros bowed low. "At once, Supreme Arbiter." But gathering intelligence on humanity proved surprisingly difficult. The humans had hidden well during their century of preparation. Their colony worlds did not appear on any maps. Their communication networks used encryption that Voldari experts could not break. Every probe sent to Earth returned with images of a peaceful, moderately developed world that showed no signs of military buildup. The humans had learned to hide in plain sight. While the Voldari scrambled for information, humanity was busy building alliances. Commander Chris Parker led the diplomatic corps. He was a tall man with a kind face and a gift for languages that bordered on supernatural. Within a month of the Battle of Kestros IV, he had made contact with a dozen species that had suffered under Voldari rule. The Kethani were the first to respond. They were a reptilian people whose homeworld had been conquered 3 centuries ago. The Voldari had taken their resources and forced their population into labor camps. Generations of Kethani had lived and died as servants. "Why should we trust you?" their elder asked when Chris met with them in secret. "You are new to this galaxy. You do not understand how things work here. The Voldari crush anyone who opposes them." Chris nodded respectfully. "You are right. We are new. We do not have your experience or your history, but we have something else. We have been where you are. We have known what it feels like to be helpless, to be conquered, to be told that we are nothing. And we chose to become something more." The elder studied him for a long moment. "What do you want from us?" "Alliance, partnership. We do not ask you to fight for us. We ask you to stand with us. Together, we can build something the Voldari cannot destroy." The Kethani agreed. So did the Morvax, a species of aquatic beings whose oceans had been polluted by Voldari mining operations. So did the Thren, the Vokai, the Silari, and 8 other species scattered across the galaxy. Each one had suffered. Each one remembered. And each one saw in humanity something they had almost lost: hope. President Lavra Chun announced the formation of the Terran Alliance in a broadcast that reached every corner of the galaxy. She was a small woman with gray hair and steady eyes, elected after the Battle of Kestros IV to lead humanity into this new era. "We do not seek war," she said, standing before an audience of billions. "We do not desire conquest or revenge. But we will not stand by while innocent people suffer. The Terran Alliance offers friendship to any who would accept it and protection to any who need it. We will not be the galaxy's masters. We will be its guardians." The The broadcast was translated into 100 languages and spread to thousands of worlds. Everywhere it was heard, people began to whisper about the humans. Some called them naive. Others called them dangerous. But many called them exactly what they claimed to be, a beacon of hope in a galaxy ruled by fear. Admiral Lawson was promoted to Supreme Commander of all Alliance military forces. His first act was to authorize the construction of the Endeavour-class dreadnoughts, massive vessels that would rival anything the Voldari possessed. "We do not want to fight," he told his admirals, "but we must be ready if war comes. The Voldari will not accept this change peacefully. They have ruled too long to simply step aside." He was right. 6 months after the Battle of Kestros IV, Supreme Arbiter Varth made his decision. He would not negotiate. He would not recognize the Terran Alliance. He would crush these upstart humans and remind the galaxy who truly held power. The Voldari war fleet began to mobilize. It was the largest military force the Dominion had assembled in centuries, numbering over 500 warships. They gathered at the edge of human space, a wall of purple metal and destructive power. Vice Admiral Olivia Grant commanded humanity's forward defense. She was 42 years old, a veteran of countless simulations and exercises, but no actual combat until now. When she saw the Voldari fleet on her tactical display, her heart nearly stopped. There were so many of them, but she did not let her fear show. A commander could not afford to show fear. "All stations report," she ordered. "Weapons charged and ready. Shields at full power. All fighters standing by." Olivia took a deep breath. "Signal the fleet. Tell them what I am about to tell you. Today we face the greatest test our species has ever known. The enemy is powerful. They have ruled this galaxy for millennia. They believe they cannot be defeated. But they have never faced us. They have never faced humans who fight not for conquest, but for freedom. Not for revenge, but for justice. They showed our ancestors mercy because they thought we were nothing. Today we prove them wrong." She paused, then added quietly, "And one more thing. We are not alone." As if on cue, ships began dropping out of faster-than-light travel around the human fleet. Kethany vessels, Morvac submarines adapted for space, Thren carriers, and a dozen other designs from a dozen other species. The Coalition had answered the call. Admiral Lawson's voice came over the command channel. "Vice Admiral Grant, the Coalition fleet is at your disposal. Total count is 620 vessels." Olivia smiled grimly. They still had fewer ships than the Voldari. But numbers were not everything. "To all Coalition forces," she announced. They thought mercy was weakness. Today we teach them it was the seed of their downfall. The Great Galactic War had begun. The first battle took place at the border of human space, in a region called the Crimson Nebula. The Voldari expected an easy victory. They had spent millennia perfecting their tactics, crushing every opponent who dared to challenge them. They were not prepared for what they found. Human ships moved differently than anything they had faced. They were faster, more coordinated, more unpredictable. Their weapons struck with precision that seemed almost unfair, and they fought together with their Coalition allies in perfect harmony, covering each other's weaknesses and exploiting every Voldari mistake. The Battle of the Crimson Nebula lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Voldari had lost 140 ships. The Coalition had lost 60-3. It was the first Voldari defeat in over 2,000 years. Supreme Arbiter Varth received the news in silence. His advisors watched him nervously, waiting for an explosion of rage. Instead, he simply stood and walked to the window. "So," he said quietly, "it has truly begun. The galaxy would never be the same." A power that had ruled for millennia was being challenged. And at the heart of that challenge were the humans, the species that had been shown mercy and had used that mercy to become something extraordinary. The war would be long. It would be terrible. But humanity would not face it alone. 7 years of war had changed everything. The galaxy that had once trembled under Valdari rule was now a battlefield stretching across hundreds of star systems. Planets burned. Fleets clashed in the darkness between stars. Billions died on both sides, their bodies drifting forever in the cold emptiness of space. But slowly, inevitably, the tide was turning. The coalition had grown from 15 species to 47. Every world that had suffered under the Valdari dominion sent what they could: ships, soldiers, supplies, hope. They fought not because they believed victory was certain, but because for the first time in millennia, victory was possible, and at the center of it all were the humans. Admiral Ben Lawson was an old man now, his hair white and his face lined with exhaustion. He had commanded fleets through a dozen major battles and countless smaller engagements. He had watched friends die. He had made decisions that haunted his dreams. But he had never stopped. "Status report," he said, standing on the bridge of his flagship Unity. Commander Hannah Price, his tactical officer, responded crisply. "Coalition forces have reached Valdari home space. 2,147 vessels information. The enemy has consolidated their remaining fleet above Valdar's prime. Approximately 1,800 ships." Lawson nodded slowly. This was it. The final battle. Win here, and the war was over. Lose, and everything they had built would crumble. "Signal all vessels," he ordered. "Begin approach." The coalition fleet moved forward like a tide of steel and purpose. They had come from every corner of the galaxy, united by a cause that transcended species and history. Kethany cruisers flew alongside human destroyers. Morvax carriers supported Thren fighter wings. Even the survivors of Kestros 4 had sent ships, commanded by Vida herself, and waiting for them was the full might of the Valdari dominion. Supreme Arbiter Vorath watched from his command ship as the enemy approached. 7 years ago, he had believed this war would be easy. He had believed the humans were upstarts who would quickly learn their place. He had been wrong. "Supreme Arbiter," one of his officers said nervously, "the enemy fleet is larger than anticipated. Perhaps we should consider negotiations." Vorath turned slowly to face the officer. "Negotiations? We have ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years. We do not negotiate with inferiors. With respect, Supreme Arbiter, they are no longer inferiors. They have matched us battle after battle. They have united half the galaxy against us. If we lose here, we lose everything." Vorath was silent for a long moment. Then he turned back to the viewport. "Then we will not lose," he said. "All ships, engage the enemy." The Battle of Valdar's Prime began with fire. Both fleets opened with long-range weapons, beams of energy and missiles that lit up the darkness like artificial stars. Ships exploded on both sides. The void filled with debris and the dying screams of crew members broadcasting their final moments. Admiral Lawson watched the tactical display with cold focus. Carrier groups launch all fighters. Cruiser divisions Alpha through Delta push through the center. Destroyer squadrons protect the flanks. The battle was chaos. There was no clean strategy, no elegant maneuver that could decide the outcome. It was a brawl, two massive forces tearing at each other with everything they had. Hours passed. Ships died. The debris field grew thick enough to obscure sensors. Captain Ethan Cole commanded the destroyer Relentless. He was young, only 32, but he had proven himself in battle after battle. His crew trusted him completely. "Captain, I am detecting the Valdari flagship," his sensor officer reported. "It is in the center of their formation, heavily protected." Ethan studied the display. The flagship was where Vorath commanded the battle. If they could destroy it, the Valdari fleet would lose coordination. It might be enough to turn the tide, but reaching it seemed impossible. The flagship was surrounded by a wall of warships. Any attack would be suicide. Ethan opened a channel to Admiral Lawson. "Admiral, I see an opportunity. The enemy flagship is vulnerable from the starboard approach. If I can punch through their line, I can reach it." There was a pause. When Lawson responded, his voice was heavy. "Captain Cole, that approach is heavily defended. The odds of survival are minimal." "I know, sir." Another pause. "Are you certain about this, Captain?" Ethan looked around at his crew. They were watching him, waiting. He saw no fear in their eyes, only trust and determination. "Yes, sir." Requesting permission to engage. Permission granted. "Good luck, Captain." "And thank you." The Relentless broke formation and accelerated toward the enemy line. Valdari ships turned to intercept, their weapons blazing. The destroyer's shields flickered and failed. Her hull was torn open in a dozen places. Fire spread through the corridors, but Ethan did not stop. He could not stop. Not when they were so close. "All crew, abandon ship," he ordered through the intercom. "I will pilot her manually from here." "Captain, no," his first officer protested. "That is an order, Lieutenant. Get everyone off. I will finish this." The crew evacuated in escape pods as the Relentless continued her death run. Ethan sat alone on the bridge, his hands steady on the controls, his eyes fixed on the enemy flagship growing larger in the viewport. "This is for everyone who died," he whispered. "This is for everyone who believed we were nothing." The Relentless struck the Valdari flagship at full speed, her remaining weapons firing in a final, desperate barrage. The explosion consumed both ships, a ball of light that burned brighter than any star. When the light faded, the Valdari flagship was gone. On the Unity, Admiral Lawson closed his eyes briefly. Record that Captain Ethan Cole has earned the title Hero of the Coalition, First Class, posthumous. Then he opened his eyes and gave the order that ended the war. "All ships, press the attack. The enemy has lost their leader. Finish this." The Coalition fleet surged forward. Without Varath coordination, the Valdari ships fell into confusion. Some tried to fight. Others tried to flee. None succeeded. Within hours, the last Valdari warship surrendered. The war was over. 3 days later, the new Supreme Arbiter of the Valdari Dominion, a younger cousin of Vorath named Sareth, was brought before the Coalition Council. He knelt in chains before representatives of every species that had fought in the war. Many called for execution. Many called for the complete destruction of the Valdari. Revenge for centuries of oppression and cruelty, but it was human. President Daniel Porter, who spoke last, thought he was a quiet man, chosen by his people not for his charisma but for his wisdom. He looked at the defeated arbiter for a long moment before speaking. 111 years ago, a Valdari woman named Thyra stood before your High Council and pleaded for the survival of a species she had never met. She asked for mercy. She argued that we deserved a chance to prove ourselves. Because of her, my ancestors lived. Because of her, humanity exists today. He stepped forward slowly. We came to this galaxy expecting cruelty. We expected to be treated the way the Valdari treated everyone else. Instead, we received mercy, and that mercy changed us. It gave us time to grow, to learn, to become something greater than we had been. It taught us that the greatest strength is not the power to destroy, but the courage to spare. Porter gestured to the Coalition representatives around him. "We could destroy your people today. We could wipe your civilization from existence and feel justified in doing so. But we will not, because that is not who we are. Because the woman who saved us would not have wanted that. Because mercy is not weakness. Mercy is the foundation of everything we have built." He turned to address the entire council. I propose that the Valdari Dominion be dissolved. Their empire will end. Their military will be dismantled. But their people will be spared. They will be welcomed into the coalition as equals, with the same rights and responsibilities as every other member species. They will be given the chance to become something better than they were. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some were angry. Some were confused. But slowly, one by one, the representatives voted. The motion passed. Sareth looked up at Porter with something like disbelief in his black eyes. Why? After everything we have done, why would you spare us? Porter smiled sadly. Because one of your people spared us, and we always pay our debts. The signing of the treaty took place on the surface of Voldaris Prime. Viva, great-granddaughter of Thyra, stood beside President Porter as the documents were completed. Tears streamed down her face. My ancestor was right about you, she said quietly. She saw what you could become before anyone else. I wish she could have lived to see this day. Porter placed a hand on her shoulder. She is seeing it. Through you. Through all of us. She planted a seed a century ago. Today, we see what it has grown into. In the years that followed, the coalition became the foundation of a new galactic order. Humanity was at its heart, not because they were the strongest or the most numerous, but because they had proven something that the galaxy had forgotten. They had proven that mercy was not weakness, that compassion was not foolishness, that giving an enemy a second chance could lead to greatness beyond imagination. The humans had been shown mercy once, when they had been weak and helpless and terrified, and they had repaid it with glory, not the glory of conquest or domination, but the glory of justice, honor, and hope. The glory of a species that had been called nothing and had,